I'll introduce our program and our speaker for tonight, board member Scott Murdock. So last year, Scott spoke to us about thin shell concrete. During that presentation, the name of Denver structural engineer Milo Ketchum was heard more than several times. Ketchum was nationally known for his thin shell concrete structures, but that was only one aspect of his work. Tonight's talk will explore Ketchum's broader portfolio. He was active in Denver from about 1945 to 62, and again in a consulting role in the 80s and 90s. He also practiced in Connecticut. He was a college professor for nearly 20 years. Most of his projects were in Colorado, but he also consulted on several significant buildings elsewhere in the country. Scott's presentation will highlight some of the notable architects that Ketchum partnered with over the years. Also mentioned will be a few of his awards and speaking engagements. So a word about Scott. Scott has studied buildings for decades, as we know, both professionally and as a hobby. His architectural history interest started with 20th century military buildings. His current passion is in shell concrete construction. You can see plenty of concrete on its website, www.shell.net, which I encourage you all. So with that, Scott, I'll turn the mic over to you and Scott's talk about Milo Ketchum.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Is my volume okay?
Yes.
Before I throw slides up, I just wanted to show you a book that Milo wrote back in I think it was about 1957. So if you know structural engineers of a certain age, they probably had this on their bookshelf at one time. The other thing I'll show you is this kind of a handmade, hand comb bound book that Milo put together. He used this as a marketing tool for his firm. And a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting his daughter, Marcia, at a Doors Open Denver event. And when I pulled this book out and showed it to her, she goes, "Oh, I remember that. Dad has us kids in this conference room assembling those and putting those combs in." So this was a fun book. I'm going to show you links to Milo's website as we go through this. His website is still up from the late 90s. His family has been gracious enough to, keep the lights on, keep it running. So I just wanted to show you a couple of toys before I throw up some slides here. And I promise most of the slides are pictures of buildings, very little text. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Milo the man. I'm no biographer, but I want to share a few highlights because he was a pretty interesting fellow from everything I've heard. Also want to talk about his firms, the various iterations of naming they went through over the years to include the branch office up in Connecticut, which I just recently learned some more details about that. It's fascinating. But mostly I want to show you pictures of buildings that he worked on. There's far beyond the thin shell that, I specialize in. I found quite a few more that he's been involved with. A lot of them, most of them local. Now, I'm no biographer, but I have here a screen grab from Milo's own website where you can see some highlights there. Now, he got his start in Colorado because his dad, Milo Sr., was the Dean of Civil Engineering up at UC Boulder. So from the start, he was born into an engineering family. And I'll mention, I used the junior very sparingly in this presentation because by the time Milo started his practice, his father had been deceased for several years. So he really wasn't using that at that point. In textbooks and journal articles, newspapers, they frequently would use the junior even later in his life. And I can only assume that's because they knew that his father was also a famous engineer. In fact, if you Google Milo S. Ketchum, you'll find a lot of information about Senior. He wrote several engineering textbooks also. So a start in Colorado, made its way to Illinois. And the reason for that is because Milo Sr. became the Dean of Civil Engineering at University of Illinois, which is also where Milo Jr. went to school. And I'm sure having your dad as the dean of your school, that was probably a double-edged sword, probably a curse and a blessing. But then by about 1945, he made his way back to Denver and started his practice. And like I said, this is from Milo's personal website. And the last slide I'll show will have this link as well as a few others that might be of interest. So I'll put that up at the end so you'll have plenty of time if you want to do a screenshot or jot anything down. This is just a sampling that I stumbled across while looking for thin shell concrete buildings. Awards, books, speaking engagements. He was in demand for many years, especially in the world of concrete. He was heavily involved in the American Concrete Institute from the early years. Very active in the Thin Shell Concrete Committee on the board of directors. And he was also occasionally called in as a consultant for damage or failure in structures of buildings. There was a thin shell concrete school out in Virginia. He was called in to assess a failure of that roof. In another case, he was looking at failed masonry in a school and determined it was due to the bricks themselves had expanded and wreaked havoc with the structure. And an interesting thing I find is he was frequently, in the popular press, misidentified as an architect. So that's just a sampling, like I said, certainly not comprehensive. I'd love to see somebody do a proper biography on Milo Ketchum. Now, tracing the history of his firm is kind of fun and interesting. Of course, he's on the left there, you can see he started at the top just as Milo S. Ketchum, consulting engineer. By 1954, he had taken on Evern and Conkle as a partner. Then there was a flurry of name changes as Hastings came and went and came again. Ryan was in for a few years. Fleming was in briefly. But then by 1969, they had settled into what was shortened to KKBNA. And under that name, they flourished for about 20 years before being bought out by Martin. And currently, the Ketchum legacy lives on through Martin, which are still active in Lakewood. And in the center there, I put down the addresses I could find. A few fairly short-lived ones for Milo in his early days. The building at 1090 Fox Street was one that Milo engineered and designed himself. Then they moved to 730 Calumet, which is a nice thin shell building with 5 barrel vaults on it. Then when they outgrew that, they moved to Lakewood into another building that the Ketchum Company engineered. By that time,
George Hoover designed.
I'm sorry, Al, go ahead.
George Hoover designed it.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, I always take notes when Alan speaks. Then there was a move to a building out on Kipling Street, and I'm not sure how long they stayed there. So I'm not sure if they were in that Kipling Street address when the Martin purchase happened.
Yeah.
That's kind of okay. And then presently, Martin is still out there on West Colfax. And Martin does certainly acknowledge Milo's influence. I was able to get out there and speak with Ben Nelson a couple of years ago. He's the chief of their structural engineering division. And he was actually interviewed by Milo when he started there back in the very early 80s. Milo was still, frequently in the building as a consultant at that time, even though he sort of phased out of the company. And in fact, when I visited, Ben showed me a conference room that they were just decorating with a lot of photos and information on Milo. It was the Ketchum conference room. Now, on the right, I kind of tried to show Milo's role. Of course, early, extremely active in his firm. About 1961, he and one of his engineers packed up and moved to Connecticut, started a branch office. Within a few years, he sold his part of the practice to Rudy Bessier, was the engineer. And Milo went on to teach at the University of Connecticut for a little over a decade. And that branch office lived on through a series of name changes and is still active today as GNCB Consulting Engineers. Milo moved back to Denver in about 1980 and continued on in a less active but still very interested role with the company. The Connecticut branch office, I just put this up to show you that sequence of names it went through. It's had the current name for a little over a decade, but still going strong. And on their website, they acknowledge the Ketchum legacy. Now, of course, in articles, textbooks, newspapers, it's usually the firm Ketchum that gets mentioned, or Milo Ketchum by name. But we know he had quite a team of engineers over the years. These are just the names that I've come across in articles, textbooks. Certainly not conclusive. Certainly not. And I bolded the last name of the folks that became principals, had their name in the company. But quite a few folks. And like I said, that's just a partial listing, I'm sure much larger. And Ketchum was very well known in the structural engineering world, especially in the world of concrete. These are just some of the engineers that he either corresponded with, met with, worked on committees on the American Concrete Institute with. Some big names in there. Felix Candela, of course, the very famous architect / engineer from Mexico. And if you're a thin shell concrete geek like me, you have several of those names on books on your shelf. So Milo was well known in the engineering world for sure. Toward the end of the presentation, I'll show you a summary of architects he worked with, which is also a pretty impressive list. Now, I want to just kind of review the thin shell concrete buildings that I already showed you many months ago. These are ones that Ketchum and his firm worked on. Of course, the office at 730 Calumet. Now, I have anecdotal evidence that Michael Barrett was the key engineer on this one. I forget who told me that right now, but I have it in my notes.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. Good old Mile High Church. The Ross House, architect James Reen. And I was able to visit that in a couple different light conditions so you can see how the shadow plays out on that unusual roof shape. Love it. Hangar at the former Stapleton Airport with Fisher and Davis. Centennial Junior High up in Boulder. Nice concrete folded plate. I just hate that they added such a thick surface on top of it, probably to contain some insulation, but still it covers up the thinness of that concrete. I don't know the architect for this one yet. And then I showed you a couple of sad photos, good old fanfare. Adam was lucky enough to get photos as it was being demolished. I was not bright enough to get there in time to get photos myself. As always, thanks, Adam, for letting me use your pics. Bill Machow was the architect for this one. And the Moore Equipment Company building. If I ever get a time machine, I'm going back to look at this one in its glory. Thomas E. Moore, architect for this one. There were 2 Tom Moores in that era, which maybe I'll do a future presentation on the 2 Moores of modernism in Denver. So those are the ones I showed you before. But like I said, Ketchum's reach went far beyond thin shell concrete, even though that was kind of a claim to fame for him. This one is thin shell, Alameda High School, with architects Wheeler and Lewis. Very nice, crisp lines on that. Arvada High School. The Aspen Institute has 2 buildings that Ketchum's firm worked on. This sharp-looking little gymnasium in the left photo there, that's composed of precast folded plate panels, which are literally bolted together. And in that bottom right photo, you can see the bolts in the ceiling and in the wall panels. It's very interesting. And that was 55. And 2 years earlier, Ketchum's firm had worked on the seminar building. Herbert Bayer being the architect for that, along with Fritz Benedict. Also an interesting looking building. Now, if you've been down to the Broadmoor, you may have seen the International Center. It is thin shell concrete. It does have a roof of hyperbolic paraboloids arranged in a 4-gabled pattern. It is hard to study that and see that because of all the trees that have grown up around it. Now, Conkle was the lead engineer, I'm told, on this one. Ed Francis and Carlisle Guy were the architects. Now, I know some of you are very familiar with the May DNF canopy that used to exist in Denver that has that similar 4-gabled Hypar roof. It is very similar. This roof is quite a bit larger. I slapped the dimensions down here for you. Popular press at the time said this was the largest example of this type of hyperbolic paraboloid roof built. I don't know of any that are larger. I can't swear that it's the largest still, but I haven't found any that are larger. It's very fun. And this bottom right photo, I happened to be there at a time when they were tearing off the roof to replace it. And what you can see here is the membrane has come off, and they've started the process of digging up insulation. So as you can kind of see, the thickness of that edge beam that runs along here is much thicker than the roof itself. There's actually a gap in there to allow insulation to be placed in and then covered up. So I was kind of lucky to get that shot. Another Ketchum project. If you've driven by the Denver Federal Center, this building kind of stands out toward the west end of that property. And this was one that Ketchum's firm worked on with Helmuth Abada and Kassabaum, HOK. By 1965, the time of this building, of course, Milo was up in Connecticut. Don't know how much involvement he had with this. Awareness, I'm, pretty sure he would have been aware of it. Cherry Creek State Park has some Ketchum projects in it. Bathhouse, and this was late. This was 1975, so in the KKBNA era, with Cable Childress as architect. It's been modified a little bit, but it was shown in some magazines back in the 70s when it was new, and you can tell it's still the same structure there. And I absolutely love the picnic shelters at Cherry Creek. Nice raw concrete, hyperbolic paraboloid shapes, but instead of a smooth surface placed over the forms, uh, the boards were just left with their straight angled edges. So if you're trying to study the nature of a hyperbolic paraboloid and how you can create one by using straight lines, that's a great teaching example for that. As you can see, the shape is really not that practical to shield those picnic tables, but they still look really cool from any angle. And the shape changes as you move yourself around those shelters. Very fun. Cheyenne Airport, and this terminal was endangered when I took these photos. I don't know if it's still standing today. It has that hyperbolic paraboloid saddle-shaped roof. It was originally thin shell concrete. Milo was a consultant on that design with the engineers Bolk and Harrison out of Casper. This building did suffer a partial failure of that concrete roof shortly after it was completed. I was not able to find any follow-up on what exactly that was attributed to. Very sad. At least they kept the shape, but it has been replaced. That is a more conventional wood and metal roof structure on the terminal at this time. In Colorado Springs, you can find this Coca-Cola bottling plant. The best way to see it, to see that distinctive folded plate roof, is from I-25 heading south as you pass over Pikes Peak. From ground level, you can only get this very slight view to show you that that's the folded plate roof. Took me a long time to find the details on this, but this was a project by Carlisle Guy as the architect. Up in Boulder, you may have seen the Colony Supermarket, still there as part of the Community Plaza Shopping Center. This was a project with Hobie Wagner as architect. And this one is interesting because rather than thin shell concrete making these nice subtle barrel vaults, it's concrete beams, T's and double T's. Very interesting. It's only one I've seen quite like that, using T's to form barrel vaults. One of my favorites in Denver is this Continental Bakery building. The large photo shows the front end of the sales office where you can go in and buy fresh bread and other baked goodies. It smells wonderful, even when they're closed. But it is a much larger facility with a large industrial-looking building behind the front end. And I'm told that David Austin was the key engineer on this from Ketchum's firm. And in that bottom right photo, you can see a little damage to the concrete. Nothing that's going to cause it to topple over, but probably shows that it had a lack of maintenance for quite a bit of time. I wish I could have seen the Kurgan exhibition hall when it was standing. It was very, very dramatic. It got a lot of accolades when it was built. Bill Machow and Ream and Quinn and Associates were the architects. From magazine articles and award write-ups, we know that Michael Barrett, Chuck Keyes, and William B. O'Neill were the key engineers from Ketchum's firm on this one. And sadly, it's gone. But it was a very unique space frame. And like I said, it got a lot of accolades and awards. But sadly, it's gone. Very interesting church up in Boulder. First Methodist. This large portion here is the addition that Ketchum and his firm worked on, in addition to a much older church, which is still there. From street level, looking up, you can see the peaks on the sides of that roof, but it's really difficult to tell it's anything other than typical flat construction. But from a parking garage across the street, you can make out the shape of those hyperbolic paraboloid panels, thin shell concrete on that roof. It's fascinating. I found conflicting information on who the architect was for this. So I'm going to say it was probably Thomas E. Moore or Bobby Wagner. Haven't narrowed it down yet. If I do, I'll give you an update. Another cool church is the Grace Lutheran in Denver. This is concrete. Concrete portal frames were erected first. Then in the space underneath them, these sidewall panels are poured and then craned up into place. And then the roof panels were added. Unfortunately, they put these shingles on the side. I've seen a picture of it when it was brand new, nothing but raw concrete, looked beautiful. Still a fascinating building though. And from one side, you can look in and see through the base of those frames. And this architects for this were Baum and Polivnik. Now here's that KKVNA office building out on Fifth Avenue. Still stands. These are very recent photos on the right. On the left is a magazine photo. It looks like I forgot to cite the magazine. Apologize for that. But it shows what was initially intended. There were steel cables running from the roof down to the ground, forming a roughly oval shape around the building. And those were intended to plant vines on, to conceal this building more or less in a sea of greenery. I don't know how long that idea lasted. Obviously, they're long gone now.
The building was built that way and they couldn't maintain the vines.
Ah, that's sad. Fascinating idea, though.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see the building still there. Another bakery, this time the Rainbow up in Commerce City. A very long, large, industrial-looking barrel vaults on this one with the stout external ribs giving extra support. Thomas E. Moore was the architect on this one. And this was fairly early, mid-50s. High school up in Boulder. In Milo's website, he calls it St. Mary's High School Gym. Most sources call it the Sacred Heart of Jesus Catholic School. But from Milo's description, it does refer to the same building. Nice folded plates. Likely Thomas E. Moore, but I'm not 100% sure of that. Stanley Aviation, now recently reopened as the Stanley Marketplace. When I visited Martin and Martin, Mr. Nelson gave me the tip that this was a Ketchum project. I haven't been inside yet, but I hear it still looks pretty grand. As you can tell from my photos, I was there at sunrise. Up in Laramie, Wyoming, you can see the field house, a fairly early project of Milo's from 1951. Fairly large. It's not concrete, conventional design, but Milo had a knack for these large auditorium-type buildings. Valley Country Club was another Ketchum project from about 1960. This is what's here today. The footprint matches up with older aerial photos, but I'm not sure how much of this design is original, how much might have changed over the years. I haven't seen any vintage photos. If it is all from 1960, it sure looks ahead of its time. The Women's Club building in Denver is kind of cool. It's got that saddle-shaped roof. It's not concrete, but it is cool. This was another project with Bill Machow. And I was there at dawn, so it's tough to shoot east into that morning sunrise. And the last one I'll show you is a cool bank up in Wyoming. Now, I'm excited that we're going to be able to do a field trip next month to the Key Savings and Loan building locally. Here's another Charles Deaton Bank project. Just did a small portion of the building, but it is very eye-catching. Very fancy concrete shelves. Just seeing this building alone is worth the drive to Casper and back. So I wanted to kind of breeze through those so I didn't keep you here all night. Here's more. These are just some of the Ketchum buildings I've found record of. Some of them are on my list to visit soon, like the Chase Hotel Auditorium in St. Louis, the Planetarium in St. Louis, which has a very cool design. Quite a few cool buildings. And as you can see, the Ketchum reach expanded beyond Colorado. So these are just a sampling of many, many of the buildings. A lot of work out there from Ketchum's time. And like I've mentioned, the legacy lives on. This is a screenshot of Martin's website. They work on a lot of very large projects. And the Connecticut branch office is also still thriving, which I think is cool to see the legacy live on like that. Now, from what I've read about Milo Ketchum, he was not a braggart, not boastful. In his own website and his memoirs, awful lot of we statements. We built this, we tried the roof structure this way, we accomplished that. Very little do you see I did this or I did that. And when you look at the architects he worked with, if you were a braggadocious engineer in Denver, I mean, you got some bragging rights if you've worked with all these architects. I mean, Charles Deaton, Charles Sink, there's Fisher and Davis, Baum and Polovnik. And there's some big names there. Bill Machow. And even if you're comparing notes and the other engineer says, well, I've done work for Bill Machow, Milo could say, yes, but I engineered his house. And if that's not enough, if the local architects aren't impressive enough, Milo could have thrown these names into the mix and say, well, I've been, done some work with these fellows as well. I.M. Pei, James Ream, Warnicki, John Johansson. It's quite a collection that he worked with over the years. And just icing on the cake, he served on a shoulder to shoulder on an awards jury with Hugh Stubbins, Minoru Yamasaki. So if he had been a boastful person, he would certainly have some bragging rights here. Now, I'm not aware of any engineer that has more than 3 buildings featured in the movie Sleeper. But each of these were seen in some small context. The Mile High Church was barely finished. The parking lot wasn't even paved, but they slapped a McDonald's sign on it and let the exterior serve as a McDonald's in the film briefly. The Ross House was featured, not from this angle. Unfortunately, you'd have to be on private property directly on the other side to see the angle of the building that was used. And there was a scene inside the Kurgan Hall. So someday I think Adam and I should do a joint presentation on the buildings of Sleeper. So that's it. I didn't want to keep you here all night with this stuff, but I'm happy to take any questions, attempt to at least, and get your comments and additions, corrections. And while we chat, I'll go ahead and leave this slide up. These first two are two different versions or two different portions of Milo's own website. One of them has that little extra hyphen in there. You can find other information on Milo at these sites. And if you're interested in the present day iteration, you can check out those websites as well. So thank you for letting me prattle on, and I guess we can chat a little bit.
Well, thank you, Scott. Incredible presentation. As always, I'm always, every time you bring something to the table, there's some lost, incredible building that's, hiding in plain sight someplace. So thank you. Before we go to questions and stuff, I'm going to adjourn so we don't feel rushed. Can I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned.
So Scott, do you know the folded plate house next to St. Mary's that Chuck Sink did on University Boulevard? Is that one that Ketchum had anything to do with?
Not that I have found. I'm very familiar with the building. I don't think Ketchum was involved on that one.
You just said Chuck Sink, and that was like the first one I thought of because I only drive every single day. There's also a hyperbolic paraboloid next to it, and none of us know anything about that house.
Yes, you've mentioned that before, and I would love to learn more about it. It is kind of hidden from sight.
There's an interesting, and I don't know, because I never went down the road to actually go and look at it. There is a really small hyperbolic paraboloid house going to Georgetown.
It's right near my Planet's A-frame.
Is that concrete?
I don't know if that one's concrete, but there's like a few. There's a weird one that has the, I don't remember what you call it, like the circus tent roof.
Yeah.
Whatever you call those. You guys probably have, I'm sure there's a name for it when they're like the circus tent, like the one that's off 38th that Snarfs has.
Oh, yeah.
So my clients bought the A-frame behind that, and the story is the guy owned all the land, and there were like small houses put on it. So those little houses you see are 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and then they like share a septic. That was like the learning curve of properties for me to sell, just FYI. Everything that could be weird about that property was weird about that property. But there's the A-frame in the back with the mansard add-on to the side, which is the one my clients bought. Then there's the one with like the circus tent, and there's a small hyperbolic paraboloid. And then there's another little A-frame. And it was like, we don't really know the story other than the guy that had the big property to the east owned all of it. And it has like a little sub, and it says Alpine something sub. So it must have been like vacation homes at some point. But yeah, no, I know exactly which building you're talking about. It's a funky one. They're a little 1 bed, 1 bath, super funky. Don't really know the story other than I can tell you there's a lot from them.
So Scott, when did he work up until he passed away, or?
I know he was still actively consulting in the 80s. I'm not sure how much he really did once the sale to Martin Martin was made.
Okay.
So that's a bit murky to me.
And I think that this summer we need to do a field trip to that hangar up at Stapleton.
That would be fun. It's a church now. I don't recall the exact name of it.
We just saw that Mike asked if there were any Ketchum buildings in danger. Do you know if there are any, Scott?
The one that comes to mind is that airport terminal in Cheyenne. I know there was talk of demolishing it. I don't know if that has taken place yet. But
I'll
with
tell you
the-
that.
with the concrete roof having been replaced, that kind of shoots the heck out of the integrity of it, especially since that's the part he was consulting on.
God, I can add one project and one architect, and it's a significant project. It's the Byron Rogers Courthouse and Office Building downtown. I was the first employee of Jim Sudler and Rod Davis on that project, and two engineers, junior engineers came from Ketchum's office named Mike Barrett and Donovan Nickel. They sat in our drafting room and worked with us on the design of that project.
Nice.
So you can add that project and you can add Jim Sudler's name.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that.
Alan, that used to have a sculptural concrete entrance, didn't it?
The office building had a sort of mushroom-shaped column as the entrance, and there was a pool. It sat in the middle of a pool. That was my design, actually. But I'm sure GSA tore it out in practically no time flat. The only photograph I have of it is the mushroom column being built right after the forms were stripped. Scott, there's one other correction I might give you.
Yes, please.
The man's name is Macho.
Macho. Okay. Thank you. Oh, and Alan, I had another question for you. Polivnik.
Yeah,
I see it spelled half the time N-I-C-K and half the time N-I-K.
I've never seen. Oh, I think it's Nick.
Okay.
I think, Josh, I sent you the clipping. Did you,
Oh, wonderful.
in an email, so you'll have the picture of the team that I put together.
Thank you, Al.
Scott, you mentioned that there were some other buildings you were going to go visit. What are the next trips you have planned this year?
This summer, I hope to get out to St. Louis. There's quite a few thin shell buildings there, a couple of them Ketchums, and a few ordinary, I call them, buildings there as well that are worth looking at. But I haven't yet spent any time in St. Louis. So that's my goal for this summer.
Scott, can you unshare screen so we can all see
You
you?
betcha. Let's see.
Excellent.
Okay.
Hey, Scott, that bank, I think it was up in Casper.
Yes,
You said Deaton did it?
yes.
Was that always a bank? Because it appears to be a bell tower with a Christian cross on it.
That's an odd tower. It is directly behind the bank.
So it's a
As
different.
far as I
building?
know, that was built as a bank.
Yes, the tower was part of that bank. I did a historic structure assessment on the building that Greeley currently uses as a city hall. And it was built as a bank by Marvin Nedler. And Marvin Nedler and Charles Deaton had a friendship, but I think they also had something of a business relationship. And when I was doing the background history for that, Deaton was originally selected to be the architect of that bank in Greeley, but the bank president and Deaton had different ideas about how the building should be designed. And so Marvin Nedler ended up designing it, but it's a circular floor plan. And then there's some thin shell concrete structures that form the shade structure over what used to be the drive-up windows. But that's a very interesting mid-modern, mid-century modern building as well.
It is. Thank you. I did not know the architect for that one.
Yeah. Nedler did a similar building in Clovis, New Mexico, that also served as a bank building that was circular in plan.
That was also Nedler?
Yes.
Excellent. I've seen that one too.
It's interesting, Scott, because when I photographed that building up in Casper several years ago, that tower had a Wells Fargo sign on it. So it's interesting that you got a photograph of it naked like it is.
Yes, I saw some remnants of Wells Fargo, like in windows and stuff. The building was, I guess, fairly recently vacated.
Okay.
Huh.
But there was,
When did you take that photograph?
It was last summer, probably July.
Okay,
or
because
August.
there was an article in the paper a couple, 3 years ago that they were considering it to remove the tower. For what reason, I don't know. So I'm glad that it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating.
That's gotta be in rough shape. It's
I-
huge. I mean, that tower is giant.
I know someone sent us that building. Shoot, was it us? Or it was either us or DMW because we had done the Deaton talk, but someone sent it to us and said they were really concerned about that bank because there was talk of potentially demolishing it. And we kind of never heard any follow-up back on it. So I don't know, that's something certainly if someone wanted to see if you could follow up on it. I think it's worth seeing what's happening to it. And I think with everything Deaton did and some of the pieces he didn't get credit for, I think it's worth following up on because I think his legacy doesn't go as far as it probably should.
Aren't that many buildings?
No.
A pretty small
Yeah.
portfolio. A surprisingly well intact portfolio for a small.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, so I've never seen the Broadmoor International Center. What was that building originally designed for?
Meetings, conferences, that sort of thing.
It's all chopped up inside. You can't get a sense, of the space.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, I went inside hoping to see the underside of that roof, but with the
Yeah.
bright lights coming down,
Yeah,
partitions, you might as well be in just a warehouse.
Well, that's too bad. That would be another site to go and see in the when we do a Colorado Springs trip. For sure. Yeah. So Scott, how many field trips are we gonna do this year? To go see some thin shell stuff?
Probably a week or so to go hit St. Louis. Possibly another week and a half to kind of sweep across Oklahoma and Kansas to catch the ones I've missed so far.
You're going to do a Bruce Goff survey.
What's that?
Are you going to do a Bruce Goff survey?
I will probably see a few of his along the way, definitely.
Well, thanks again, Scott. Your research always blows me away. I
You're
mean,
welcome.
there's a vast amount of stuff out there, and God, you're chipping away at it.
Can I throw an idea out for a future presentation?
Yeah.
Would there be any interest in a presentation kind of like this, showing the ICBM missile sites that are in Colorado?
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
because we've got Minuteman, we had Atlas E, we had Titan II.
Yeah.
And they have some pretty distinctive structural features that just through popular culture and movies and TV, we've seen little snapshots of them without necessarily knowing what we were looking at the time. But I could slap something together to show those off.
Let's get that on the docket for sure.
That would be neat.
I have an article in my archives on them that, I don't know if you have it already or not, but I'll send it to you just in case.
Thank you.
It's on specifically on the ones that are out just east of Aurora.
Yes. And I haven't been inside underground in any of those particular ones, but there is a very well preserved one up in Washington State that I've toured. So I can show pictures that are very, very representative of those ones in Aurora.
Really neat.
Nice.
There's also the Titan Missile Museum down outside of Tucson, which I toured, and that's the one,
Yes.
the silo that they used in Star Trek Generations when they have the big like
Is
fight
it?
scene and everything. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, that was a super cool tour. Oh my god, that was cool.
Sort of a military modernism night.
Like that.
Well, neat. Yeah, that'll be really neat.
Okay, I'll get to work.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Bree, you know where that church is?
Yeah, I do. It's down the street from me. I walk by it all the time. I love it.
Oh, which one?
Now it's called like something of friendship, but one of the church that you showed with the
Oh, the one in Boulder?
no, the one here in Denver in Hale.
Grace Lutheran.
Yes.
What it used to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's right down the street from me. I walk by it all the time.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, now I'm rooting for Team Bauman Politnik, so, you know.
Yeah, add that one to the list. We're gonna have to do a Bowman Politnik tour.
Yeah. Who did the, who did the, and I think this was in your program last time you spoke. The thin shell building that's just south of Deaton's Bank. The church.
Oh.
What's that? The heck is that church called?
I know the one you mean.
Yeah.
Was he involved with that?
I don't think so, or I would have definitely included it. I know Thomas E. Moore was either the architect for the funky church or the school next to it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the computer with my database is shut off right now, or I'd pull it right up.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
doing
that's
some
the-
work on that right now.
Good.
Yeah.
And when I was photographing that, you know, some local guy came out of his house and came over, and I thought he was going to chase me away. But instead, he's like, yeah, been in that place many a time. That roof leaks like a sieve.
Of course.
It was made with all those, precast folded plate panels trained into place. And I guess there were some issues with the seals over time.
Yeah.
That's how you know it's a roof, right? Because it leaks.
Yeah. Well, this will be a good segue into our concrete talk and our theme next month, so. And I'm excited to get toward that,
Yes.
because I think the last time I was in there was when they had just done the nomination stuff for it. It was really, really fresh. But I remember the first time I was ever in there, I went in to go check out the bank, and the teller was giving me a hard time because, this is just where she works. Why are you in here? What are you doing? Yeah, you need to leave. If you don't belong,
I thought it was a big deal when they let people actually walk around and tour it.
Mhm.
Isn't that bad?
Do they think they'll let us in and tour it again?
I think so.
Just with our group, it'll be fine. I'm gonna call my
His
head,
daughters,
but-
I was gonna say the daughters, if even.
Yeah, we won't just show up.
Too, do that.
Yeah, we shouldn't just show up with our masks on.
No.
Yeah, to walk in.
Masks and cameras.
Who is this weird group?
We're just documenting.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. That was a little loud.
Documenting.
Documented.
Yeah.
Mhm.